There is hope for the future. Our hand is stretched out for peace. We want peace. Peace is always, always better than war. Even a cold peace is better than war.
Israel for decades has been saying that Iran is on the cusp of developing a nuclear weapon, stockpiling nuclear weapons and so on. So why now, this moment in time?
We are at the 11th hour.
Our enemy, Israel, can have these nuclear weapons and the ability to deploy them, but we can't?
Well, I'm not going to discuss here any of these issues.
What is the price tag on the head of Hamas? How far would Israel be willing to go?
When Hamas ceases to exist as a military force and a governing force in Gaza.
Ambassador Sideman, thank you for doing this interview.
Thank you for having me, Colm.
You have been the ambassador for just under a year now, is it?
Yes, 9 months to be exact.
9 months. What would you say are your main priorities as Israel's representative to the Holy See and to the Vatican?
Well, we're living in quite unusual times these days in the Middle East, and these days my top priority is to engage the Holy See in every which way possible in order to help facilitate the release of the 53 hostages that are still held in subhuman conditions in Gaza, 622 days to date. The moral voice of the Pope on this is critically important, and I appreciate it every time it is voiced. I'd like to see it voiced at every possible opportunity. Then there are others. We are witnessing these days a very worrying surge in anti-Semitism worldwide. Here too, the moral voice of the Catholic Church, of the Pope, are critically important. Anti-Semitism is a plague on societies, it is a poison, and that threatens our core values. And it should be called when seen. And combating it is, again, very, very important, and the Church, I think, has a very important role there. And then, of course, I would love to see the Catholic Church, the Holy See, stand with Israel and by Israel in its fight against forces of evil in our neighborhood. They threaten not just Israel, but civil societies all over the world.
We can talk about Gaza in a moment, and some of the things that the late Pope Francis would have said about Gaza and humanitarian aid, and now Pope Leo. But looking at the current situation of what's happening between Iran and Israel, with people watching on around the world in fear that this is going to escalate into something like World War III, have you had a chance to meet Pope Leo and speak to him about this yet?
To be honest, no. But I have had a very small interaction with him during his meeting with the diplomatic corps. That was way before the current operation in Iran. What I told him there, I can share with you, is first of all, I welcomed with open arms his commitment to relaunching and engaging in a dialogue with the Jewish people, half of whom, as you know, live in Israel. I invited him to Israel, which is significant for the three Abrahamic religions, in order to relaunch that dialogue in the Holy Land as soon as possible.
What did he say to you in response?
He didn't respond. It was like a very quick handshake, a few words thing, but those were my few words.
When we look at history, there has been such a profound relationship between the Jewish people and the Iranian people. I know that Jews have seek and been given refuge in Iran for centuries. Even during World War II, during the Holocaust, Iran was one of the few countries that not only tolerated Jews, but it protected them as well. What is Israel doing today to try and prevent the current conflict escalating even further?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. Up until the Islamic Revolution in 1979, Israel and Iran had peaceful, friendly relations. I remember my father, as a child, going on business trips to Tehran. There was absolutely no issue at all. Then in 1979, a very radical, fundamental regime took place, and it's still in control to this day. And it has made it its business to annihilate the state of Israel. But it not only says so, and repeatedly over the course of the years, it also builds up capacities, nuclear, ballistic, and others, in order to implement it and practice what it preaches.
Why now, Ambassador? Because I know Israel for decades has been saying that Iran is on the cusp of developing a nuclear weapon, stockpiling nuclear weapons and so on. So why now, this moment in time?
Well, there has been a significant amount of intelligence that clearly showed that in the recent months, Iran has accelerated to an unimaginable degree the pace of both its nuclear weapons programs, there are several of them, and its ballistic missile programs, to the point where it has already today, and I'm sorry to go into technical terms, but I would just say enriched uranium to a 60% grade, enough of that for 9 nuclear bombs, and producing the ballistic missiles with which to carry that payload at a rate of 300 per month. And that acceleration has taken place in the recent months. We are at the 11th hour. After, for decades, including recently with the United States, chances for negotiations and diplomacy round after round have been provided. And unfortunately, they all failed.
You talk about negotiations failing. I know that the late Pope Francis repeatedly called for dialogue. Pope Leo has called for dialogue. Is there any room left for dialogue, or has that passed in your view?
Well, first of all, both of them are absolutely right in claiming and stating that dialogue is the preferred way of resolving any disagreement. A dialogue has failed in this case, not just the recent round, but decades, at least from the day I remember myself as a cadet in the foreign ministry in the early 90s. To this day, round after round of dialogue was held by Iran under false pretenses, manipulated, and resulted not in the decrease of its military nuclear program, but on the contrary, an acceleration of it, to the point where today it is too close for comfort. If we do not eliminate the nuclear program, it will eliminate us. So we had to take action. But dialogue, of course, is always preferable. It just didn't work in this particular case.
If dialogue isn't going to be the answer, how is this going to end, do you think? How are you going to try, in your view, maintain your security in Israel?
Well, it will. I'm not saying what the future holds. The future may hold the dialogue as well. But right now, one way or another, militarily or voluntarily, it will end with the elimination, or at least significant scaling back, of the Iranian nuclear program and its ballistic missile program that are an existential threat on my country. But they're not just an existential threat on Israel. I can quote, not exact words from memory, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz just from a few days ago, who said Israel is doing the dirty work for all of us. Iran, this mullah regime, used that term, is a threat to all of us.
To play devil's advocate, those in Iran who would say, well, it's widely believed that Israel has nuclear capabilities and nuclear weapons, although they haven't said so. So our enemy, Israel, can have these nuclear weapons and the ability to deploy them, but we can't?
Well, I'm not going to discuss here any of these issues. I can tell you this. Iran is the only country, the only UN member that repeatedly for decades has been threatening the elimination of another country, of Israel. It has been building the capabilities in order to do so, and has just last year fired unprovoked 400 or so missiles at Israel and rockets and drones at Israel to prove that it means what it says. We cannot live under such a threat, full stop.
At the beginning of the conversation, Ambassador, we spoke about that profound history between the Jewish people and the Iranian people. And there are many people in Iran today, particularly young people, who do not support the regime in Iran or its ideologies, but at the same time have no ill will towards the Jewish people or to the State of Israel. And they look on in confusion and in fear now as missiles strike densely populated places like Tehran. And what would you say to them?
I will say to them, our fight is not with you. We have the utmost respect for the Iranian people, for the Persian culture, and we sympathize with their suffering. Their suffering is a result of a brutal, radical regime that has taken them hostage. We are now engaged in an operation that, yes, is designed to prevent our elimination, but also weakens that regime a great, great deal. I hope for the Iranian people that will result in a regime that is better for them, that can return to the friendly, cordial, peaceful relations that existed before the Islamic Revolution in 1979. Our fight is not with the Iranian people.
People are looking now at the United States, wondering what the next move will be in the world of geopolitics. Will they get involved in this conflict? Will it escalate even further, as we mentioned, and turn into World War III? Are there any efforts that you can talk about happening behind the scenes between Israel and the Vatican or religious channels that are trying to de-escalate in some ways that we're not aware of?
Well, you mentioned World War III and such doomsday scenarios. If anything, what we are doing now is preventing a World War III or a regional nuclear race. Let me quote the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia from about 2 weeks ago. I forgot where he was interviewed. He said that the Iranian leader, he equated him to Hitler, and he said, too many countries didn't pay attention to what Hitler was doing until it was too late. I, said the Crown Prince, do not want to see the same thing happening in the Middle East. He further said, if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, we will have no choice but to get one ourselves. Now, I ask you and your viewers, Iran is just a heartbeat away, had we not stepped in, of acquiring military nuclear capabilities. That would have thrown the entire Middle East, which is, without military nuclear element, a very volatile area. It would have thrown it into a military nuclear race. We are preventing a World War III. We are preventing further escalation by depriving Iran, the most dangerous regime on earth, from this most dangerous, deadly weapon on earth.
And of course, we don't have the Iranian ambassador to the Holy See here, but I was watching on CNN last night, someone from the Department of Foreign Affairs in Iran, and they were saying again that that enriched uranium, even if it is up to 60%, is for peaceful purposes and for power generation in Iran. But what about the words of Pope Leo, where he said that no nation should threaten the existence of another? Is that not what is happening here with this conflict escalating further and further?
Yes, let me first clue you in. There is no other country in the world that has a peaceful nuclear program which obtains enriched uranium to a 60% grade.
And the International Atomic
Agency
for
Iran.
Said that, yeah.
And the IAEA last week confirmed that Iran is in severe non-compliance with its nuclear. So, I mean, the Iranians can say whatever they want, but what more evidence and proof does one need than the international watchdog on nuclear issues putting their word that says exactly that. I fully agree with the words of Pope Leo that no one should existentially threaten another. And I also agree with his words that indicate the great danger in having nuclear capabilities. He also said that. And if we cannot acquiesce with these two things, surely we cannot acquiesce with a combination of the two. That is, a regime that calls for the extermination of another country and also is in possession of the most deadly means with which to carry out its threat.
Let's talk about Gaza and the war in Gaza. Pope Francis, the late Pope Francis, he spoke often and very strongly about the need for peace and humanitarian aid getting into Gaza. And Pope Leo, even in his very first public general audience, he said, "I renew my heartfelt appeal to allow the entrance of dignified humanitarian aid to Gaza to put an end to the hostilities whose heartbreaking price is being paid by the children, the elderly, and the sick people." How does Israel react to statements like that from the Holy Father and from the Vatican?
Well, first of all, I think they reflect a genuine concern for the well-being of the population in Gaza. And it's a concern that we share as well, which is why Israel is allowing unfettered, almost, access, certainly of essentials, of food, medicine into Gaza, and is monitoring on a daily basis, several times a day, the situation in Gaza as it relates to the amount of food, of water. We are monitoring all of that and allowing all of that to enter into Gaza. The problem is not the entry of it into Gaza. The problem is the distribution of that assistance once it enters into Gaza. And there is a huge challenge because Hamas takes control, basically hordes, violently takes control of the humanitarian assistance that is meant for the population and uses it, deprives it from the population and uses it to build up its own military capacities.
I remember just a few months ago, I interviewed Cardinal Pizzaballa, the Latin Patriarch in Jerusalem, and he is over the Holy Land. He's been there for a number of years, and he said it is one of the worst situations he has ever seen in the Holy Land, and he has seen his share of violence and conflict there. He said that he has seen starvation used as a tool against the people in Gaza. And I know that Israel has been criticized by many international bodies, by the Holy See as well, under the late Pope Francis. How does it respond to this criticism?
There is no starvation in Gaza, at least not in the definitions that applied by the international community. Israel is abiding by each and every letter of the international humanitarian law as it relates to providing assistance into Gaza. That's number one. Number two, there is a great deal of distress of the population in Gaza. That much is very, very true. And there are also casualties, and each one is a tragedy. A tragedy. There is one party responsible for that, and that party is called Hamas. It launched a barbaric attack on Israeli civilian population on October 7th, 2023. It forced us into a war of self-defense that was not of our choosing. That suffering will end the moment Hamas ceases to exist as a military and governing force in Gaza, the moment that happens, and our hostages are returned.
What is the price tag on the head of Hamas in Gaza. How far would Israel be willing to go to say that they're confident they've eliminated Hamas?
When Hamas ceases to exist as a military force and a governing force in Gaza, and our hostages, all 53 of them, are returned back home, that is when there will be no need for continuation of activity in Gaza. If that doesn't happen, and Hamas stays there as a military or governing force, we are basically writing the recipe for the future October 7th, only that one will be way more stronger and more barbaric than the first. It's like, now that can happen in two ways. Either Hamas can voluntarily pile up its weapons, get on a boat and travel far, far away, or we're going to have to take it out militarily. We care also for our children. I hope that is okay. And we do not want another October 7th on our doorstep.
I remember the family members came to the Vatican to have an audience with Pope Francis. Israeli families whose children were being held hostage in Gaza, and also Palestinian family members whose loved ones were being held in Israel. The Pope met them separately, and we had press conferences with them afterwards where we got to interview them. Now, when we spoke to the Palestinians, they told us, we were never able to confirm this because they're private meetings, but they said strongly that the Pope had told them he believed what was happening in Palestine, in Gaza, was genocide.
Well, like you said, it was not confirmed or denied, but it was not reacted.
It wasn't denied by the Vatican either.
But it wasn't responded to or confirmed. So I cannot attribute that to Pope Francis. And in general, I want to look back and with a great deal of respect to the Catholic Church and to its to the previous popes and to the current one. I appreciate that Pope Francis did meet on three occasions, by the way. And that's not, he could have said, I'm putting a check on the first one and I don't need to do this again. On three separate occasions with family members of hostages and with released hostages. He did call for their release publicly more than once. And yes, he also had made statements that to say the least, made us feel a bit uncomfortable. But I do not want to go back and open that account again, if you will, with your permission.
What would you say, Ambassador, to people watching this interview now around the world, people of faith and people of goodwill, primarily Catholics on EWTN, who, whatever about the politics and who's right and who's wrong, they watch on their television screens, they look at the images in the newspapers and on social media of the terrible suffering on both sides, in Gaza, in Israel, in Iran now as well. They find it so hard as people of faith to justify the bloodshed and the suffering and the pain. What would you say to them as Israel's representative here to the Holy See?
I can say the following. The Jewish people have returned to their ancestral homeland after 2,000 years of exile. We intend to stay. What you see now is not going to deter us. On the contrary, it galvanizes us and it makes us more perseverant and determined. We, in a very short period of Israel's existence, we not only returned to our ancestral homeland, we galvanized Jews from all four corners of the world. We revived the Hebrew language of the Bible as the spoken language of Israel. And we've also accomplished peace, which gives room for hope. We've accomplished peace with our fiercest enemies until that point, with Egypt, with Jordan. We've normalized relations with Bahrain and Morocco. There is hope for the future. Our hand is stretched out for peace. We want peace. Peace is always, always better than war. Even a cold peace is better than war. And I am sure, I'm certain that we will be able to get there with all of our surroundings, because it's a win-win situation. It's better for all.
Ambassador Sideman, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.